Well, it's all come down to this.
One, two, three!
Hey everyone, it's Don G. Corleone here, and I'm here with episode 16 of my Halloween Horror Movie Season 3, and this episode is going to be for a sequel to a 1973 horror film that I reviewed last year. That horror film, as you all know, is known for being one of the greatest horror films of all time. This sequel, on the other hand, that was released 4 years after it in 1977, is most certainly not. And that sequel is going to be for none other than, and as well this episode, it's going to be for 1977's The Exorcist 2, The Heretic. Yeah, that piece of crap. Let's get on with the plot. Well, Dr. Jean Tuscan works with troubled children, perhaps none other more troubled than Regan McNeil, who suffers from bad dreams and repressed memories. The memories she represses are of the time she was possessed by a demon. Dr. Tuscan's invention, a device that hypnotizes two persons and links their minds together, reveals that the demon named Pazuzu still lurks within her, and it is desperate to emerge again and wreak havoc. Meanwhile, Father Philip Lemon is ordered by his colonel to investigate the death of Father Mern, the priest who died while performing an exorcism on Regan. Father Lemon undertakes his task reluctantly. He feels unworthy of his assignment. He also feels that evil is literally an entity, and that this entity is winning the battle over good. His investigation takes him to Africa, where he locates another recipient of Mern's exorcism, and he learns something fascinating and terrible about locusts. Well, how is this film made before I get into details? Well, neither William Peter Blatty nor William Friedkin, the team behind the original Exorcist, had any desire to make an Exorcist sequel, and it was because they were filing lawsuits against both the studio and each other over profits, credits, and Blatty being buried from post-production during the first film. According to the film's co-producer Richard Leder, Exorcist 2 is conceived as a relatively low-budget affair, and what he essentially wanted to do with the sequel was redo the first movie, have the central figure, an investigative priest, interview everyone involved in the exorcism, then fade out to unused footage, unused angles from the first film, a low-budget rehash of about $3 million of The Exorcist, and a rather cynical approach to movie making that he admitted, but it was just a start. So, this sequel was doomed from the start, pretty much, if it was going to be a rehash anyway. Playwright William Goodhart was commissioned to write the screenplay, titled The Heretic. He based it around the theories of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, and Goodhart's screenplay took a more metaphysical and intellectual approach compared to the original film, and here the battle between good and evil would center on human consciousness with the specific idea that, within the framework of Catholic theology, human consciousnesses could be brought together as one through technology, although this would result in conflict between those who sought good and evil. And so after the movie was filmed and completed, it would go on to be released to the public on June 17th, 1977, and what can I say? This movie was obviously a critical failure. Exorcist 2 is often considered to be one of the worst films and worst sequels ever made, like I myself call it, and it was sadly the last film to feature veteran actor Paul Henreid. Eesh. Not a good way to go out for a career. And you know, as for my reaction, this is easily known to me as the worst horror sequel ever made. Just everything about this movie just stinks, and it sucks ass I'm even ranting on this film that should never even be talked about or mentioned. Considering that The Exorcist is considered a classic and made $1 bazillion, it's amazing that the sequel is as inept and stupid as it is, and it is truly a terrible film. It makes you wonder, as any boob with as big a budget as this film could have made a good film and had no right to make one this bad. Like, I've never been so bored in my life as when I was forced to watch this. Even if you manage to forget that it's the sequel to one of the greatest horror films ever made, it's still a real stinker, and even if it would be considered a standalone film. It's hard to even describe the plot for this, although that may just be due to the fact that I was struggling to stay awake watching this movie. Suffice to say that it doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense, and it isn't very interesting either. All actors involved in this movie just appear to be sleepwalking, with Richard Burton's performance being particularly funny. This turkey would be full of gems for fans of bad movies, though, to be fair. At least they didn't just try to do a rehash of the first film, attempting instead to tell of Father Merrin's original encounter with the demon, and unfortunately that result is an incoherent mess. The film just consists of long, boring hypnosis scenes and equally mind-numbing African shots, but there's still a feast of bad acting to enjoy, with Linda Blair and Kitty Wynn giving abysmal performances, but even they are overshadowed by Richard Burton's hammy efforts. The script is ludicrous, and the cheesy theme music that walks through the film would not be out of place in the Emmanuelle movies. What I also should mention is that this movie was directed by John Boorman, who, by the way, guys, interesting story about him. John Boorman hated the original movie. So Warner Bros. Wants to make a sequel to The Exorcist, and they pick a director who despised the first one. Wow, so if Warner Bros. Wanted to cash in the original success, why did you choose a director for this fucking movie who hated the first film? And why would Boorman want to even do it? Did he think he could make a better movie? What was his motivation to make this pretentious crap? And then again, this movie shares a lot in common with another sequel I reviewed, Blair Witch 2: Book of Shadows. Because they're both made by a greedy studio that wants to cash in on a popular horror film, but the original director wants no part of it, so they get someone who despised the first movie expecting something marketable, only to watch in horror as a new director sends them back a confusing, pretentious mess that wouldn't entertain a toddler, let alone a grown adult. In a span of about 2 hours, the movie gives us these things: a magical dream machine that can look into your mind, a priest riding a giant bumblebee, Linda Blair curing a young girl's autism by smiling at her, Linda Blair walking on the air, James Earl Jones in a locust costume. Yes, James Earl Jones is in this, guys. Characters giving corny monologues about hope and light that really mean nothing, and then a Linda Blair clone trying to seduce a priest creepily before turning to a spooky zombie monster. So yeah, this movie's just a long, playful slog of boring nonsense, bad writing, and it's all managed by a really bad director who's just a really dumb horror directing person. There was nothing at all which grabbed my interest. I'm even wondering if the film was paced too quickly, but it can't be because I just spent an hour and a half hoping it would be over soon. So in that respect, it wasn't paced quickly enough. But I just kept missing bits because the lack of interest lets your mind wander. I was just thinking, well, if they had just waited a year or two before filming so that Linda Blair would look a tiny bit older, and it wouldn't feel so wrong to just fancy her in this movie. And the actress in makeup to look like Regan from part 1 is just terrible. I want to say more about how bad it really looks, but I can't put it into words so much because it's just so terribly designed. What exactly made this the most expensive movie WB had ever made at the time? I reckon it was probably all the first-class travel expenses for the cast and crew, because I don't see where it was spent on screen. The ending of the film may have cost a bit, but it doesn't look very good even for a film from 1977. Richard Burton did have a quite long career behind him with some big movies in there. Can't say I remember him in any of those titles that I have not seen except for just 1984's O'Brien, which I had to review for past me's punishment for not listening to his craptivity warning. But I will always remember him for giving him the worst on-screen performance in a horror movie I have ever seen as a priest. He just basically wanders in front of the camera or lingers there waiting to deliver his lines, and when he does speak, you just wish he would put in a bit of emotion into his voice, but it just sounds so monotone. But then again, it was kind of during the time he was starting to be in poor health, so that would kind of make sense. Oh wait, and he also just, whenever he walks, his hands stay perfectly by his sides, and his movement is just that wooden. Now, okay. Is there any good qualities or redeeming qualities they're probably all thinking of for this? No, there are zero redeeming qualities for this movie. I just can't even think of any redeeming qualities for this movie at all. It really is that bad. Well, maybe possibly just, the only good thing about this sequel would probably just be the appearances of James Earl Jones and Ned Beatty. I do a parody in this sequel. But I don't even know what in the hell managed to convince the greatest cinematic villains of history, Darth Vader and Lotso Hucking Bear, to star in this cruddy sequel from hell. So yeah, other than those actor appearances, I've got zero redeeming qualities for Exorcist 2: The Heretic, and now that I just think about it, I think I'm honestly just done ranting on Exorcist 2: The Heretic. I've got nothing else to say, because like Hellhound has said, the less ever said about this sequel, the better. So yeah, I'm done ranting on Exorcist 2: The Heretic. And I'm just done. I've got nothing else to say about this movie, and I don't think we need to mention anything else about this movie at all, because this movie should never have been mentioned. So in the end, Exorcist II: The Heretic is a horseshit sequel to an iconic horror film from the 70s, and I will pray to God I will never, ever have to watch this ever again in my life. Anyways, that's it for my review of Exorcist II: The Heretic, and if you're wondering how I'm going to rank Exorcist II: The Heretic, here's how I'm going to rank this movie. So overall, please do not ever watch this movie and skip right to Exorcist 3, because there is not a single time worth wasting on this crud. And if you're wondering how I'm going to rank Exorcist II: The Heretic, I'm going to give Exorcist II: The Heretic a 0 out of 10. And there we go. That pretty much wraps up my review for Exorcist II: The Heretic. So you're wondering what the next episode's going to be. Well, the next episode is going to be for a zombie movie, and it's for one from legendary filmmaker himself, George A. Romero, and it was the first installment of the whole Dead series. Yes, guys, the legendary Night of the Living Dead is going to be next. But until then, guys, that'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching. And if you like this and want to see more, and don't forget to like, subscribe to Don G. Corleone.